And I'm Keon.
And this is Inevitable, that podcast that's a mighty fine shindig, because this week we watched Shindig.
Written by Jane Espenson. Hey, didn't have to wait too long for
Hey!
her to show up.
Directed by Vern Gillum.
And aired on November 1st, 2002.
Interestingly, Vern is spelt like Jules Verne, but without the E at the end.
Vern Gillum, never heard of him before, but his name does sound actually like it would be a name you'd hear in Firefly. You know, it has that kind of Western, talk about the Western twang in the soundtrack. Forget that. This has a Western twang to it.
I really thought you were going to say Vern Gillum sounds like the name of a director who would be on one of these like old sci-fi shows.
It does too, yeah. According to Wikipedia here, he produced and directed hundreds of commercials.
Nice. I guess. Nice. Apparently in 2006 he turned to the creation and production of his own shows, and I guess he was never heard from again in the television world because none of his shows got produced, I suppose. And he hasn't directed anything since 2005, according to IMDb. So yeah, I guess he turned to produce his own shows and then just vanished from the TV production world.
Man, that sucks.
Man, I wonder what he's actually doing now.
Yeah, I mean, I've always, not to go on too deep a tangent with this, but like, that's something I've always wondered, just like looking at various actors' careers where they have massive gaps in the career. It's like, all right, what were you doing in that interim? You know? It's like you really couldn't have been carried by your previous paycheck when it was 20 years ago, right? Like, even no matter how big the movie was.
Well, if you were smart and put it into some like indexed mutual funds or something, I don't know. Play the stock market, turn that 20 million into 200 million.
Yeah,
The
and
great thing about the stock market is the more money you put in, the more money you get out.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe they were just all the exact opposite of Nicolas Cage, who like I guess it's like not entirely his fault. I don't even know if you know this, Keon, that the reason why Nicolas Cage is in so many movies is basically because his accountant, so he claims, like mismanaged his funds for 15 years, and Nicolas Cage was not only like bankrupt because he bought like a freaking castle in the UK, but also because he didn't pay taxes for like years, and the IRS decided, hey, we need to collect on like all your property taxes that you haven't been paying. And he owed like $20 million in property taxes for like 1 year alone. So that's why Nicolas Cage is basically in every movie now, because he's essentially like broke.
Wow. That I don't know. For some reason, that sounds totally appropriate to the mythological Nicolas Cage character that has been built up in people's collective memory.
Do you know about like the weirdest Nicolas Cage movie that's I guess coming up? It's called The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent.
No, I haven't heard about this.
It stars Nicolas Cage, and here's the premise. Nicolas Cage begrudgingly accepts a $1 million offer to attend the birthday of a Mexican billionaire superfan. When things take a wild turn, Nick is forced to become a version of some of his most iconic and beloved characters in order to extricate his wife and daughter from the fan, who is a notorious drug lord.
Wow, that's some Ocean's 12 nonsense. Sounds really interesting, actually.
I think Nicolas Cage has also announced that that's like the one movie that he's going to be involved in that he's not going to watch because it'll be too much of a trip. But anyway, that's enough of the Nicolas Cage cast. We're here for Shindig, episode 4 of Firefly, although not according to IMDb. IMDb puts it at like episode 6 or something.
Yeah, because they're filthy fox shills.
Well, actually, IMDb has the most like curious episode order I've ever seen. That like doesn't track with the Fox order even.
Oh man,
Well,
alternate episode order. This is The Prisoner all over again.
Let me Yeah, just give me 1 second to pull up the actual the Fox order.
All right, I'll just vamp while you do that and say that, like, for some reason, over the past, 8 months to a year, actually, yeah, more like a year since we've watched The Prisoner, the phrase custom viewing order, bro, has, like, always stuck in my head.
Okay. No, so actually, yeah, I'm looking at these air dates on IMDb and for Fox, and I guess the IMDb order does it seems like track with the Fox order. I guess because IMDb by default orders everything in airing order, which in the Fox order this was aired as episode 6.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're getting to the point in the show where the order matters kind of less, episode 4 for this one versus episode 6, when Fox aired it.
Mm-hmm.
These middle episodes of the show are fairly episodic, so yeah, I think we are.
Yeah, they're
the
pretty
point
self-contained.
Yeah.
This episode doesn't feature any overarching, it doesn't even feature any overarching like character moments. With any of the other episodes.
No.
Interestingly, I know you said that the DVD or the Blu-ray doesn't include the voiceovers at the start of the episodes, but again, Hulu does, and this episode. So if you're keeping track, Serenity featured no voiceover. Train Job and Bushwhacked both featured Shepherd Book's voiceover, but this episode featured Malcolm Reynolds' voiceover.
Huh. Good old Nathan Fillion. Wonder what he's doing on this show. No, I'm just kidding.
Mal's voiceover is a lot more like anti-alliance than Book's. But Book's is actually almost completely neutral. Like, oh, we left Earth, we terraformed hundreds of new Earths, and that's pretty much it. Mal's is like, we terraformed new Earths. The Alliance decided that everybody has to be a part of the Alliance, and some of us didn't much like that, so we fought a war.
Yeah, not really ingratiating us to his cause. If that's they told us, if that's sort of the reason, I guess, of like, it seems sort of vapid almost when you explain it like that. I'm sure there's more to it. Yeah.
So Wikipedia here includes the voiceover at the beginning, but it says reruns start with Book or Captain Reynolds providing the following backstory, and then this paragraph that they include here is word for word Mal's voiceover, but is not the one that Book says.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't realize that they were actually different. I thought they would just be...
They're not different by much. Mal has a couple lines about how he fought in the war. I think Book mentions the war. I think overall the content is the same. Mal's is just delivered in a much more aggressive tone.
Mm-hmm. More anti-alliance. I guess it's not as as vacuous a thing as I guess was kind of making it out to be. I mean, if someone knocked at your door and was like, "Hey, you're gonna join our new country now," you'd just be like, "What?" Like, no.
This is actually, I'm actually realizing this is not entirely Mal's voiceover either, because it ends with Book's. Book ends his voiceover with, "A ship would bring you work, a gun would help you keep it. A captain's goal is simple: find a crew, find a job, keep flying." Whereas Mal's voiceover goes, "Oh yeah, there's a crew of us. We've got a doctor too. He brought his sister, got her out of some sort of alliance camp. He's like, this is my ship, and if there's a job, I'll take it." Something like that. I didn't write it down exactly.
Wow, amazing memory to have just pulled that out of thin air, I guess. Congrats.
I did watch this 12 hours ago, maybe not even.
Yeah, same actually. Watched this at 2 a.m.
Anyway, so we open in much the same way as the Train Job, actually, in a bar. Where tensions are running hot already, again, because Mal is already antagonizing some of the patrons of the bar.
Yeah, he walks up to Inara and he goes like, "Hey, there's a thief on the loose." And she's like, "Oh, really? What did he steal?" And he just pulls some papers out of his pocket and he goes, "These."
She's like, wow. She's like, how long is he going to take until he notices? And Mal's like, oh, until he gets his next drink. And the guy taps him on the shoulder and he goes, heavy drinker, that one.
Yeah, so that a bar fight ensues.
And they have to make a hasty escape.
Yeah.
And once again leave the planet.
Just the phrase bar fight, I was going to be like, what if it was a pub fight rather than a bar fight? And like, what if Firefly, instead of the Old West in space, was like, I don't know, like Victorian England or Edwardian England in space?
It's such a weird comment to make, because at the end of this episode, I was going to talk about how so much of this episode doesn't even feel like the Old West. This episode does feel like Edwardian or Victorian England.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I guess we'll talk about it, because we need to explain the plot for some of the points I want to make. But anyway, they decide to go to this planet, Persephone, which Wash is like, it'll be good to be back home, and Zoe's like, I thought you hated being home, and Wash is like, well, yeah, but it'll be nice to be on the ground again. And Mal comes in and is like, yeah, don't get too used to it. Pretty much everybody on Persephone hates us.
Yeah, does he say that? Yeah, I don't remember.
He says something along those lines.
Mm-hmm. There's definitely no, shortage of ire for them throughout the episode for multiple different reasons. Meanwhile, Inara is picking her next victim.
Well, that's a remarkably, like, pessimistic way to put it.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm just kidding, but, like, yeah, she is picking her next, like, client.
Yeah, that's more accurate.
Who's about to pay her, like, exorbitant fees. So...
But then she gets a message from this guy named Atherton, who's, as we gather, has proposed, I guess, marriage. I think it's less of a marriage and more of a purchase. He says that she'll have to serve him as his like personal companion.
Yeah, he says it later that she'll be his personal companion. So I assume it's just basically the same thing, except she doesn't have any other clients except him.
Yeah, that was kind of my interpretation as well.
Yeah, which, I mean, it's a sort of a realistic thing, even in today's stupid economy, where it's like, you can, if you're a good enough freelancer in anything, whatever, writing, graphic design, anything that you can be a freelancer in, if you're good enough and you can secure a singular client, then that's pretty much the way to go.
Yeah. So he's on Persephone, so this is convenient for Inara, because, she tells Mal about this and basically says, yeah, I haven't decided if I'm going to take him up on his offer yet, but I'm going to go meet with him and decide, I guess.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the rest of the crew goes out, and they're walking the mean streets of Persephone. They see this big pink dress. And, okay, so this is actually kind of hilarious, because... Okay, so Mal says something, because Kaylee really wants this dress. And Mal says something, I assume hurtful. But what's really funny is I actually, like, missed what Mal said to Kaylee, and I kind of, like, I zoned back in, and everyone was, like, mad at Mal walking off. This actually made the whole rest of the episode kind of hilarious, because I had no idea what Mal had said to Kaylee that would, like, induce this response in everyone. I had genuinely no idea.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, this moment kind of informs the character relationships for the next, like, 40.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I know. I know now. So I know now what he said. He said basically that Kaylee would look like a pig walking on her back, two hind legs. But, like, at the moment, I completely missed it. And I went, it's probably not going to be that important. It's probably not going to come back into play like at all. And then like 15 minutes later, he's buying Kaylee that dress. And I'm like, wait, I guess it did come back. Maybe I should have paid more attention.
The final shot of the episode is her looking at the dress. Like, it's not actually, but it's close to it.
So, whoops, I guess.
Yeah, he basically just said that, like, she would look terrible in the dress and that it wouldn't, like, suit her.
Yeah, everyone was kind of PO'd at that comment, I guess.
Except Jane, he didn't really seem to understand what was happening.
Yeah, well, Jane's just Jane. Jane has plenty of opportunities to usurp the captaincy in this episode and doesn't do it, surprisingly.
Yeah, maybe that just hints that he does, as much as he doesn't want to admit it, he does have some sort of respect or, feeling of duty towards Mal. Perhaps.
Yeah, it's very much Kerr, Avon, Raj, Blake-esque.
Yeah, it is.
Avon was always gunning for the captain's chair, but if I seem to remember that even he admitted that in many situations that they encountered in the Blake captaincy era, that Blake made better choices than Avon would have.
Well, it's that thing, we actually, when we watched Blake 7 on our Blake 7 podcast, Zenith, the Blake 7 podcast, check that out. When we watched the show, I don't think we ever really touched on this explicitly, but like before Blake left, spoilers for Blake 7, I guess. Before Blake left, Avon was always like, I want the ship and I want your captain's seat. And then after left, it was like, Blake was this, almost martyr figure or something, or like this mythical legend to Avon. Avon couldn't, get over Blake.
Avon also realized like how much it actually kind of sucks to have to make the decisions and not like, when he was second in command, as Jane is, and I think as Jane kind of realizes perhaps before Mal leaves, or with, at when Mal is there as opposed to when Mal is not, is a better way to say that like it kind of sucks to have to make decisions and not have a fall guy. If you're the second in command and you make a bad decision, you can just play it off like, well, I'm not in charge, and like, Blake went along with my plan kind of thing. Or Mal went along with my plan. Whereas once you're the captain, you've got no one you can fall back on.
Mm-hmm. And it's actually interesting though, comparing this to Blake and Avon, where it's like Avon and Jane, who are basically the second in not Jane isn't really a second in command, but they're both vying for that captain's seat, or both kind of have it in for the captain. Are such completely different characters.
Yeah.
Although in a very broad sense, they are like sort of underhanded but endearing. Like that about them is the same.
Underhanded but endearing.
Mm-hmm.
They're only endearing because Mal, I guess, really walking back Serenity Mal doesn't decide to just brutally murder someone in cold blood in this episode.
Yeah. Well, it's like, you can come at this from the angle of like, there's a pun hidden in there, but I'm not going to tease it out, of like, he's in a sword fight now, and he has that like almost double take reaction to, what, we're fighting with swords? Like he's a man of guns, and
guns, germs, and steel.
Yeah, well, trains, planes, and automobiles. And using a gun, I guess, too. Not that I've ever killed someone, obviously, but like killing someone with a gun is probably completely different than with a sword.
It's a lot more impersonal. We've talked about, the impersonality of dropping nukes on people on Trust Your Doctor many times over.
Yeah, and killing someone with a sword is definitely very different than pushing them into an engine.
Yeah, never forget, that was just 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Imagine if, like, when Mal had Wing at his mercy, it just actually flashed back to that scene, like actually put it on the screen.
Mal just goes, "I'm a merciful man," and Inara is just standing over the side, and she like just flashes back to him throwing the guy into the engine.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think she was actually present for that. Actually, but
Oh,
but
all right, okay, Firefly expert over here.
but yeah, that would be hilarious.
Anyway, Badger, right after everyone leaves, Badger basically takes Mal and Jane, and he tells Mal that he's got a job for him, kind of. It, he mentions, like, oh, yeah, so there's this guy who has a job, but he, like, doesn't really, like working with me directly. So I need you to go to this party, and I need you to meet up with him and get this job and take the job.
Right. And did they actually say that Badger was going to be their guy on Persephone, or did it, or not? Because I was surprised when he showed up, but I couldn't tell if I like had just missed that line.
No, I don't believe they had mentioned it before.
Yeah, because I turn around and he's there, and I'm like, "Hey, it's Badger." I'm surprised I even
Hey,
remembered him, to be honest.
man, it'd be really, really weird getting these in the wrong order, thanks to, you know, Fox. Because in this episode, they mention the events of Serenity surrounding Badger.
Yeah, I guess you would just have to accept it as sort of like, it's something that happened in the past between them, that was never on screen. And, if you were watching it back in 2002, you would have no way of knowing that this was actually a reference to something that should have been broadcast already. Most likely, I don't think it was widely known that these were airing out of order, like at the time. Like if you were a couple weeks into Firefly watching these live, like I wonder. Yeah, I mean, now that I mention it, I guess I wonder whether it was known or not.
I don't think it was. I think Fox wouldn't want to publicize that.
No, no, not at all. I wonder if like Firefly had aired, 15 years later, and maybe one of the actors or cast or crew of the show would have just like taken to social media and been like, WTF, like it's not airing in the right order. What's going on?
I'm imagining, shoot, what was his name who played number two in like the final episodes of
Oh yeah, what
Prisoner?
was his name? Yeah.
Leo McKern. I'm imagining Leo McKern taking to Twitter and being like, "WTF is up with this like out of order BS?"
The rest of the cast and crew like disowning Patrick McGowan for it, or ITV or whatever for airing it in that order.
So, Mal basically comes up with his plan to get into this party by using Kaylee, I guess, or maybe he just takes Kaylee with because he feels bad and wants to make it up to her. He feels bad for just like crushing her hopes and dreams earlier.
Well, it seems like it's a party for couples, right? So it's like it's either her or Zoe, and Zoe's not going to go, as his date. So
Yeah, because she's busy.
she's busy.
She's busy. Yeah, she's busy. Let's leave it at that.
She and Wash are busy. There's multiple. This is not our first Firefly episode with a sex scene, but it is our first Firefly episode with. Oh no, I guess it is just one. Yeah, I was gonna say it's multiple, but it is just one. For some reason, I kind of remembered it as this scene between Wash and Zoe taking place over two separate times. But yeah, it is just one, I think.
Yeah, it's just the one. So, much to everyone's shock and awe, by which I mean to no one's shock and awe, Inara is also at this party because she had mentioned to Mal, she's like, "Oh, Atherton's gonna take me to a party." He tries really hard to like play this off when he sees her, like, "Oh, just on business, just go into a party. She's like, this is the only party in town.
Right, right. And this is, before we even get anything with Mal and Kaylee at the party, we're getting more with Inara and Atherton. This is where he asks her to be his his companion alone.
His companion for life.
And she says she'll think about it. It doesn't seem to be an empty promise. Seems to be seriously considering it.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, if you can find one person who'll just pay you for your work forever,
Mm-hmm.
that's like the dream.
We get a little bit more about Inara's, I guess, line of work or who she associates with. She says at the beginning of the episode that most of the people at the party are not going to be companions, because she kind of gets into a little spat with Mal at the beginning. We kind of skipped that, but they sort of are passive aggressive to each other. But when she gets to the party, there does seem to be other companions there. There's at least one person she knows, and she goes like, "Hey," and they kind of, they know each other type thing. Which I guess doesn't mean that she's a companion, but that's what it seemed like to me. It seems to be what it was implying. And yeah, she, all things considered, like, Inara does seem to fit in a lot more with like Atherton's crowd than with Mal and the rest of them.
Yeah, well, she doesn't have to, be almost blown up by the Alliance every week if she just hangs out with Atherton.
No, and when she's dancing with Mal, they have a very interesting conversation, which pretty much happens right now. We can explain it when we get to it in just a minute.
Yeah, so when they get to the party, there is an interesting kind of moment that I want to mention, because we had mentioned, well, I had mentioned, I guess, in Serenity, that Kaylee like longingly looks at the strawberries, and there's been this continuing kind of theme that food is really scarce. There's like a really subtle moment where that really plays into this when they get into the party, and Kaylee is like shocked that they have like real mangoes there.
And not only that, her as soon as she sees the buffet table, she's like, all right, that's where I need to be. And Mal is like, all right, fine,
Yeah, he's just here for the job. He's like, all right, yeah, just do what you got to do, live your best life. She first gets into a sort of spat with these two ladies, but then some guy comes and just completely dunks all over the ladies. He says like your dress looks really nice, and then he says like, but pity that you've had to go through so many men to pay for it, or something like that.
No, he insinuates that she'll sleep with anyone. He's like, it must have taken you forever to get into that dress, but it doesn't take you long to get out of it, or something like that.
Oh yeah, that's what it was. It was like, it would take you 1,000 slaves to get into that dress, but you'll get out of that dress for the purse of it, than the first man who offers it to you.
Yeah. And then later on, we see that Kaylee is, she sort of has fallen in with I don't know, this guy's group, and they're talking about spaceships or something like that.
Yeah, they're talking about engineering. Nice to see Kaylee so happy. After Mal just like dunked all over her.
Yeah, well, after everyone in this episode just kind of seems to, I guess, be dunking on her. After this point, though, she's kind of just a side note, honestly.
Yeah, everybody kind of vanishes from the episode for a while.
Badger actually does occupy Serenity. Him and his men show up.
Yeah, but that's not till Mal decks Atherton in the face, which is not till after he asks Inara for a dance.
Right. Atherton doesn't look very pleased about this, but the other guy, the guy they're actually here to meet, whose name was, hold on.
The guy.
Oh my god. It was Warwick Harrow, Sir Warwick Harrow, actually. He seems to be sort of enjoying the tension.
He enjoys anything that makes Atherton squirm.
Yeah. And he actually, Mal kind of, gives him the rundown, and he doesn't really trust Mal,
Yeah, he's not sold on
understandably.
Mal's like pitch for this job.
No, and we as the audience at this point don't even know what the goods are yet. And it's kind of, I don't know, it's like almost, it's the best moment of the episode when you find out what they are. But anyway, yeah, like you mentioned, Mal asks Inara to dance. Atherton is pissed, but he can't say anything about it.
Yeah, so they have this conversation about like, you know, Serenity mostly.
Yeah, well,
The concept, not the ship.
the movie. They talk about the.
They talk about the future movie,
Yeah.
the then upcoming movie.
No, so what stuck out most to me from this conversation though was like, they have this sort of difference of opinion about their line of work, and this is actually elaborated on later when they're practicing for the sword fight, which is that Mal, sees Inara's line of work as like as something bad or as shameful. Her retort to that is that like, well, it's illegal, and what you do isn't. But as we saw in Bushwhacked, Mal has very little regard for I guess just like commonplace morals slash ethics, and kind of just lives by what he thinks is right.
Yeah, yeah. This conversation also, Mal makes the point. He implies it here when Atherton comes over and says something about Inara, and Mal punches him in the face. But he elaborates on this later because he keeps saying like, oh yeah, you learned that at horror school, etc. She's like, oh, but you keep calling Atherton like a pig for saying things like that, but you say them. And he says, well, like, I think the difference is that I don't like your profession, but I respect you as a person, whereas Atherton doesn't respect you.
Yeah, just sort of I guess insight into the way Mal's mind works. Because that dichotomy does not come across, I think, to the audience or any of the characters in the show other than him.
It only comes across when Mal says it, which, show don't tell, etc., etc.
Right. I guess I mentioned last week, I think, how much more I'm enjoying the show this time, and I kind of overlooked a lot of this stuff the first time watching it. Some of the more interesting, I don't know, character traits or moments, which I guess is contributing to me liking it a lot more this time, because I am really enjoying this like a lot so far.
Yeah. There are a lot of like subtle character moments that are really enjoyable.
Yeah, it's still like 10 weeks for them to mess it up, so
Yeah, they just mess it up next week. I do feel that this episode was weaker than the ones we've seen, just because I feel like it spends. There's like so much of the episode is spent just setting up the main conflict, and the main conflict is resolved in like 5 minutes. It does the like Doctor Who thing that they used to do in the like Stephen Moffat, Russell T era, where they'd set up the story for 35 minutes and then spend the last 10 actually solving it.
yeah. Or like,
Which, is like can be done well, but this episode, like, they spend so long building up the planet of Serenity and this just absolutely like bizarro culture that then like at the end of the episode it's implied they'll basically never be able to really go back to Serenity. I mean, Persephone again. So like they spent all this time setting this up just to be like, yeah, we'll probably never be there again.
yeah, it's like the As I Lay Dying technique, where it's like the entire book is them going to bury the mom, and they bury her in one sentence at the end, it's really impressive actually, and it's like, oh my god, like you put the book down, and you're like, what did I just witness?
Well, I'm just thinking like compare this to the train job, where the first thing that happens is they get the job to rob the train, and then like they rob the train, and then the conflict is like, oh, Mal and Zoe have been stuck on the planet and we need to get them out somehow. And during the course of that conflict is where we learn like, oh, this planet had like a plague, and the things that they stole are medical supplies. We learn about the culture of the planet, that people like to go to the outer, out of the city to the country to find jobs. Whereas, compare that to this episode where we land on the planet. We learn that companions have a really big place in this society.
Which we already knew.
Mal,
kind of.
Which we already knew. Mal learns that he can get a job by going to this party. We see this party. We learn about the culture. We learn that like there's a lot of emphasis placed on having your own people to make your dress, which we didn't even mention, that the lady like insults Kaylee for buying her dress out of the store instead of having it custom made. They're like very snooty. Mal punches Atherton in the face, and then we get to the conflict, which is the duel. Just comparing those two, I prefer the way that the train job did it than,
it's interesting. Most of these Firefly episodes seem to have, not very, plot-wise, they're not very complex. But, like, what's interesting is that there's always some sort of, like hidden next step or something like that to the job. Like in the train job, they pull off the job and they have to deal with the aftermath of it, which is essentially undoing the job. And this one, they're going to do a job similarly. And then Mal gets into his duel with Atherton. So there's sort of, I don't know, there's like something hidden within each one.
Also weird that like Bushwhacked and the train job are kind of similar when you like reduce it down that much that in the way that you just did.
A Bushwhacked or Shindig?
Bushwhacked. They both begin with them successfully pulling off the job and then getting captured and then having to like basically undo the job.
Yeah, I guess they're not really doing. Are they doing a job? No, they're not. Right? They just came.
Well, the job is just a salvage job, stealing from the ship.
It's like a job
they're not
set
working
for
someone else, but they are still doing a job.
Yeah.
They're just doing it for themselves.
Yeah, all right. Interesting phrasing there, but sure.
Anyway. Yeah, so he punches the guy in the face, and they're like, yeah, we don't stand for that here. He's like, well, sucks to be you then.
There's a scene where earlier on they have some sort of advanced like detector or something where you can't bring your gun to the party, and Mal's like, well, all right then, let's go get our guns and have our duel right here and now. And they're like, guns? What are you talking about, man?
Yeah, we use swords. He's like, wait, what?
Yeah, no, he's completely caught off guard by this. It's actually funny how quickly he goes from like, yeah, I can take you to like, oh my god, I'm gonna die tomorrow, aren't I? Because Atherton is like a master fencer and Mal has like never held a sword in his life. Yeah, and Atherton.
Yeah, I have a note here that this like in this episode, over the course of one night, Mal will now become an expert swordsman.
And he doesn't, and it's actually, it's I think done sort of well in that sense, where it's like he wins the sword fight by basically like a fluke, almost.
Yeah, he wins because he has the power of distraction on his side.
Yeah, basically. And Atherton is pulling off some like very fancy moves and basically like gets Mal down onto his knees, stabbed already in the stomach within the first like 30 seconds of the fight. But we'll get there. Because in the meantime, Mal trains with Inara. She comes to, he's staying in some sort of room. She comes over and she's like looking at his technique and she's like, wow, you're going to die tomorrow.
Well, like you said, this is when Badger occupies Serenity, basically to prevent them actually from having Mal escape.
Yeah, I didn't understand his explanation, to be perfectly honest, of why he walks in and they're like, oh God, why are you here? And he explains it, but I didn't understand what he said.
His explanation is basically like, oh, he needs Mal to either win or lose, because if he escapes like a coward, then that'll reflect badly on Badger since they work for Badger, basically.
Oh, right. I guess, I mean, nobody, it would only reflect bad on Badger for Sir Warwick, because nobody else really knows, I think. But, yeah.
Yeah, and Sir Warwick is like has already offered to be Mal's second, which means he fights if Mal declines.
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't get his explanation for doing that either. He's basically just like, yeah, you punched Atherton in the face, and anyone who punches Atherton in the face is good by me.
Yeah,
So I'm gonna risk my life.
pretty much, yeah. And it's interesting that like we're kind of saying like, oh, I don't get this character's explanation, I don't get that character's explanation, or like I think you described it a few minutes ago as like they're baffling society or something like that, which is like this is sort of we're getting sort of a a more Victorian, I don't know, side of the Firefly universe or the Firefly solar system or something like that, where they kind of are living by these high society rules versus what we saw in the previous episodes, which were very much like frontier Old West type stuff.
Yeah, there's actually rules in this one.
Yeah, and they are they are baffling. Like the
and
rule
they're breaking them.
right, and the rules. I guess what this episode kind of displays is like the rules make less sense than like the ruleless places we saw before.
The lawless society.
Mm-hmm. Or it almost like, I mean, compare this to the train job, like just compare how much worse like the townsfolk are. Or like how little regard they have for one another. Because I mean, we talk about Warwick in like a funny way, because he's obviously like he's from the audience perspective, he's against like Atherton, who is just like this total d-bag like guy, sort of like, yeah, but at the same time he is also like he's part of this too. He's the one kind of I don't know, not getting off, but like something close to it on like this guy's suffering.
Yeah. So anyway, Mal and I have this conversation that we've already kind of touched on and explained. And Inari eventually says something like, "Well, you're gonna die tomorrow." Like,
it ends
too stubborn to like accept that.
It ends with Mal kind of showing his hand, maybe unintentionally or not as much as he probably wanted to, where he basically says that he wants Inara to stay.
He tells her, he doesn't even ask, he tells her not to accept Atherton's proposal. And she's like, what? Well, it's my choice. And he's like, yeah, I know that, but
don't do it.
If you get to the point where you even have that choice, that means I'm dead, and he'll have been the man who killed me.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's definitely something that's not animosity between Mal and Inara.
It's a nice will they, won't they situation.
Yeah, it is.
So that we get to the duel. Things are not looking up for Malcolm Reynolds.
No, they
Atherton's doing all these fancy moves and they haven't even started the battle yet.
Like as soon as they actually engage each other for real, Atherton does this really fancy twirl and basically just stabs Mal in the stomach.
Starting off on the right foot there, Mal.
Because Mal basically just rushes at him and swinging the sword like it's a tennis racket or something. And he's basically doing the exact thing that Inara told him not to do last night. And yeah, he gets stabbed. And it's like, I obviously don't really know too much about sword fighting or fencing or anything like that, but I feel like if you just get stabbed early on, and you're like bleeding out, you're pretty much done. You're not gonna win.
You're at a big disadvantage moving forward.
Yeah. Mal doesn't give up though, much to seemingly everyone there's surprise.
And possibly chagrin.
Yeah, possibly.
But then, the guy just pulls this like completely BS move, in my opinion. He like steps on Mal's sword and it snaps in two. Just completely handicapping Mal for the rest of this fight.
Yeah, honestly, it seems, there really are no rules once they start the fight. It's just, whoever lives, I guess.
Seems kind of unfair, but, not my society, I guess.
Well, how Mal actually wins is pretty unfair, too. Inara basically just steps in, and she's like, please, Atherton, don't kill him.
She says she'll stay there with Atherton if he leaves Mal alive.
Which gives Mal the perfect opportunity to deck Atherton once again.
Yeah, and then, I don't know if you noticed this, but he picks up the snapped off blade. Like the blade, I thought at first he picked up Atherton's sword and threw it into Atherton, but no, it's actually the disconnected blade that he's picking up by hand and throwing it into Atherton's chest.
Yeah, reminds me of so I watched this movie not too long ago, maybe a couple months ago, called Snake Eater. It's sort of this Canadian take on like an 80s action movie. And I'm not going to explain too deep about what it's about. But basically there's a scene in it where a guy's like strongly grasping a sword and just his hands are just gushing with blood. And it looked really painful.
Great. Awesome.
But anyway, yeah, Mal basically has Atherton at sword point, basically won through the power of distraction.
Through the power of cheating blindly. Mal won't cheat and leave before the battle starts, but he'll cheat in the battle.
Yeah. Well, he actually says, like, when he's meeting with Inara at night, he's like, I never run away from a fight. And she's like, yeah, you do. You do more often than you don't.
You literally did it last week.
Yeah, I mean, if you were watching this in Fox order, the first thing you see him do in the show is run away from a fight. If you're watching this in the actual order, the first thing you see him do in the show is lose a fight.
Yeah. Great.
And not through his fault, actually. He just happened to be on the losing side.
I mean, he was involved, Yeah,
he didn't know that they were just gonna, like, hang them out to dry, not send reinforcements.
I mean, he should have known better. He was a commander. He should have known the entire military strategy of his side.
Maybe, yeah. Anyway, everyone in the audience is like, wants Mal to finish Atherton off. Warwick steps up and he's like, yeah, do it.
While this is going on, we've like completely neglected to mention that the rest of the crew is trying to come up with a way to escape Badger's iron grip on them on the ship.
Which is less of an iron grip and more of a, I don't know, wandering gaze or something.
That's true. He basically lets them just wander the cargo hold freely.
Yeah.
And he sees River and is like, who's this then? Or it's more like, ooh, who's this then? And
yeah, this is really funny. I don't know if you found this to be actually really funny, but I did.
Yeah, I did. River just busts out a perfect, like, I guess, Cockney accent, and Badger's just like, nice to see another person from the homestead.
No, I know, and it's so, like, you think he's going to get so offended by it, and he's just like, oh my god, it's one of my people.
And then she just walks away, like, call me when someone interesting shows up, and Badger's like, home.
And then it cuts to Jane being like, that was the exact type of distraction we needed. And
could have used.
Right. It's interesting, actually, now, we bring it up, there's sort of the Serenity team is looking for a distraction to escape or to subdue Badger, and then Mal sort of also wins distraction, sort of a parallel of distraction, a nice distraction mirror, you might say.
And they're about to execute another plan to escape, and they're like, okay, here we go. I've already filled the doctor in on the plan. We're ready to go as soon as I give the signal. And then Mal just walks in and goes like, yeah, like, what's going on over here, guys?
Right, because much like they were unable to execute their plan, Mal was unable to execute Atherton. He lets him live, but he stabs him a couple times.
He stabs him a couple times. And then Ar's like, you didn't have to do that, right? And he's like, yeah, but I thought it was funny.
This convinces Warwick to give them the job.
Okay. Like when you just say it, it doesn't sound very convincing, but he does say like, oh, if you're gonna fight that hard to protect my cargo, then you have my word.
Right. We cut forward a little bit. Kaylee has kept the dress.
Obviously, it was Badger's money. Not like they're going to give it back to Badger.
And she does something that always, puts a grimace on my face when I see it done in movies and TV shows, and it happens more frequently than you might expect, which is that she jumps right onto her bed with shoes on. I always hate that.
You've mentioned this a couple times in On Trust Your Doctor. Keon's shoe on the bed watch returns.
Yeah, I don't think I'm alone in thinking that it's a gross thing to do. Imagine doing it yourself. Imagine just like you come home after a long day of work or doing whatever, and you just jump right onto bed with your shoes on.
I mean, yeah, I don't know what to say. We
also see that I think we had actually seen Kaylee's room before, or at least the door to it, but she lives next to the engine.
She loves that engine.
Yeah.
And she's apparently hooked up like an engine side wine fermentation system, which seems really dangerous. I looked up, like the process to make your own alcohol once.
Moonshine.
Just out of curiosity, and it's and when I read that like some of the alcohol you produce is not the alcohol that's actually in things like vodka and wine. It's a different nucleotide that if you drink can just make you go blind. I was like, you know what? Like, it seems like way more effort than it's worth.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what people do in like Iran and other parts of the Middle East where alcohol is like illegal. Just make it in their sink.
Great.
Yeah. I mean, that's what people did here too back in Prohibition, 100 years ago.
Speakeasies.
Hell yeah. Anyway, that's what Mal and Inara are drinking. They're sort of reminiscing about the events of the last day.
Reminiscing about the last 24 hours.
Yeah, the wild ride they've just embarked on or been on. Gotten off, rather, I guess. And we learn, you cut out, and you learn what the cargo was. Cattle.
Cows. Yeah. Cattle.
Now, this is obviously just heavily implied. They don't actually come out and say that the cargo was the cattle.
Yeah, I mean, I guess they could have stolen the cattle from someone.
Yeah, the job was like a completely different set of cargo. They just happened to like have some cattle on board.
That somehow seems less likely.
No, yeah,
Occam's razor, you
yeah,
know.
the way it is displayed to you, it's very clear that the cargo is the cattle.
And that's the end of Shindig.
That's actually another indication on how valuable, or of how valuable food is in this universe, where it's like they have to go through so many hoops for this cargo, and you're like, oh my god, what is it? What is it? What is it? And it's like basically a food source.
Yeah, I mean it is a food
Mm-hmm.
source. Even if you don't eat the, if you don't eat the cattle itself, it produces milk,
Right,
which you can drink, which you can use to make cheese and butter. So,
right.
living, breathing food source. Ugh, when I put it like that,
Well,
ugh.
I mean, everything you eat was alive at some point, whether it's plant, animal, uh, protist.
Yeah, but my plants aren't gonna speak to me. They're
Wait.
not gonna moo at me.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I was like, all right, animals aren't speaking to you. I kind of want to know, what they're saying.
Well, Becky the cow just told me last week that she's absolutely enamored with Stan the bull. That's what the cattle are speaking about.
Oh, I thought they just told you to eat more chicken, like in the Chick-fil-A ads.
Nah, that's actually a lie, you see. That's just a clever marketing lie. Fun fact, eat more chicken is not what the cows are actually saying. It's just a clever marketing lie by Chick-fil-A wanting to get you to eat at Chick-fil-A. Dylan will be back with more fun facts next week.
Speaking of fun facts, what Western, uh, you know, uh, tropes? I can't believe I have been hesitating to say that actual word because I don't really like the word trope, but for multiple reasons. But yeah, what Western tropes were in this?
Well, the guy getting thrown over the bar top is just classic
Yeah, all
Western.
right.
But then, as I said earlier, this episode, it's just weird. This episode takes a kind of interesting turn because it's not really a Western. It's more of like a Victorian Edwardian culture, even.
Yeah, it's sort of that old West era, but not the West. It's like I don't know, 1870, but you're living on the East Coast or something, a northern city or something like that.
Yeah, it is kind of like the East Coast during the Old West kind of thing. But even it's more like the New England, like new money, no, sorry, old money living out in Rochester, New York kind of
Yep,
thing.
yep. And you can
Which,
imagine that like this is because that was the beginning of like industry as we know it today. Like steel, coal, all that stuff. But like you can kind of imagine that this is the same in the Firefly universe of like these are the people who are kind of involved in that type of thing.
yeah. And, you know, the East Coast existed during the Old West. It was a pretty big economy, but it's something that you almost never see in Western movies, TV shows, any Western media, because things set in that era almost always are a different genre of production, and so it's interesting to see it here in Firefly.
Yeah, it's like you're watching, I don't know, for a few dollars more, and you're thinking, man, like a room with a view, the novel was like happening at the same time. And not really, actually. Room with a View is more like directly previous to World War One type thing, but like it's sort of the same vibe or whatever, sort of the same idea of like there's such a vast like gap between these different societies, and that's actually true today still. Of like you know we're
Mm-hmm.
sitting here recording a podcast. I mean, there's people in the world who like you know, live like basically the same as their ancestors did like 1,000 years ago, type thing. There's such a large, I don't know, gap, greater even than what we're talking about of like the old West. So it's interesting actually that Firefly is exploring these ideas and so early on.
Right. Fascinating. That's actually pretty much all I wanted to talk about for Shindig.
Yeah, same here. I don't think I had any real Western tropes, Western things. I was just gonna say that, like, yeah, the party itself kind of was, because it is sort of a party from that era, I guess, but it's not really Western as such.
Yeah, well, I guess that leads us into I say, America's
Yeah.
10 actors. So I looked up, let's see, Mark Shepard, who plays Badger. He was actually on Doctor Who as Canton Delaware the Third, if I remember correctly. So we've actually seen him before.
Who is Canton Delaware the Third again?
Do you remember in Day of the Moon? That one where the Doctor gets killed?
Yeah.
The old man who shows up to watch the Doctor die is Canton Delaware the Third, and then like when he goes back in time in like the Impossible Astronaut, I don't actually remember what order those two were in, but when he goes back in time and Canton Delaware is like a CIA agent working for Nixon.
Oh yeah, yeah.
That like the Doctor meets up with.
Yeah, that entire era was such a blur, or is such a blur, actually, to me still. But yes.
Well, better brace yourself.
What?
It'd be really funny if after Russell T era 2, we got Stephen Moffat era 2.
Oh my god. That's the one where I would be just like, all right, maybe it's time to...
Scraping the bottom of the barrel, the BBC.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was a side. That was an aside. He's also been in White Collar, Chuck, NCIS, Dollhouse, another Joss Whedon production, Battlestar Galactica, Leverage, Doom Patrol, which is he's currently on Doom Patrol with a recurring role, Warehouse 13, Supernatural, Burn Notice, Medium, 24, Monk, Murder, She Wrote, Jag, Star Trek Voyager, and Silk Stockings, which was actually his very first acting credit was Silk Stockings.
Yeah, so he's basically like a hugely prolific actor who's been on most popular TV shows.
Most popular American TV shows. He's like who he's like the Cyril Shaps of the current American generation.
There's something Shaps-esque about him.
Shaps-esque?
Yeah.
Wow, I can't believe we just said that. You just said that on this podcast.
Well, what would you rather it be, like Shapsy or something like that?
Shapsian.
Yeah, Shapsian. That's good. Anyway, Edward Atherton. Oh my God, Edward Atherton plays Atherton Wing.
Yeah, that's not confusing at all.
No, yeah. He got his start with the Poirot TV series in 1993. He was on Medics. He doesn't actually have a very extensive career. It looks like he stopped acting in 2005, so I sincerely wonder what he's actually doing now.
He did the same thing that Vern, what's his name, did, the director of this episode, just vanished after 2005.
Yeah. Anyway, some other things he was in: Pie in the Sky, Peak Practice, The Wingless Bird, The Man in the Iron Mask, a show called 3, Children of Dune.
That feels weirdly ominous.
Yeah. He was in the Children of Dune, the TV series, TV miniseries. Looks like the last thing he was in something called Wild Card.
Huh. Interesting.
Oh, and then, yeah, I guess we did this in a bad order because I have another one too.
Yeah, we did this. We did do this in a bad order, but that's okay.
Yeah, so I looked up Larry Drake. He played Sir Warwick Harrow. Unlike unlike Edward Atherton, he does have a pretty extensive career stretching back to the 70s, where he was in stuff like Date with a Kidnapper, The Seniors. He was in American Playhouse. Nice. The Taming of the Shrew. Well, it looks like that was some sort of direct-to-video thing in 1983.
Great.
Yeah. What else here? Just trying to look at for stuff that kind of he was in Tales from the Crypt. The Legend of Prince Valiant, L.A. Law, The Naked Truth, The Beast, Superman the Animated Series. Yeah, he's a couple voice acting roles here, it looks like. The Legend of Calamity Jane, Prey, Batman Beyond. Yeah, he does actually, come to think of it, have a sort of a voice that, he has a sort of a voice actor's voice. Sort of a budget, he kind of sounds like the green dinosaur from Toy Story.
Rex.
Yeah, it's like a knockoff version. Hey, he was in Johnny Bravo.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. American Pie 2.
Yes. Cinematic perfection.
Yeah, L.A. Law, the movie. I've only seen American Pie 1, unfortunately, or maybe fortunately. No, unfortunately. I liked American Pie 1 was decent. Really strange, though, in a way. Seventh Heaven, Attack of the Griffin, sounds interesting. Green Lantern, First Flight. Star Wars, The Force Unleashed. And yeah.
Oh, I've played that video game. That one's actually really
a bunch
good.
of other stuff, yeah. Yeah, so that's him. Oh, wait, what? He was in The Karate Kid. I somehow missed that.
Oh, yeah, I forgot you read these live.
Yeah. I didn't realize that was the poster for The Karate Kid. I'm looking at like a very odd poster for it. I guess I'll put it in the show notes.
All right, well, put it in the show notes, boys and girls. All right, well, that's that then.
Yeah.
If you would like to email us, you can reach us at thedoctor@decadentvegetable.com. Questions, comments, concerns, angry rants, love letters, your thoughts on Shindig. You can find us on YouTube at Decadent Vegetable. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and anywhere you find podcasts at Inevitable. Be sure to leave a rating if you like the show.
Check us out on Facebook. Trust Your Doctor. Like us on Facebook. Also check us out on Twitter at TYD Podcast. And follow us on Twitter. And next time we're going to be watching Safe. But until then, the end.